Hello, my friends. Welcome to One More Step to Wellness. I'm your host, Juliet Nelson, psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner and an advocate for holistic well-being. Today, we're going to talk about one of the 8 dimensions of wellness that gets overlooked quite a bit. It is intellectual health. We tend to forget this because when we think about mental health, we're thinking about stress. We're thinking about anxiety. We're thinking about things like depression. But what about our intellectual health? You see, the mind and the body are connected. And so we must recognize that feeding the mind, feeding the brain, and nourishing ourselves helps us to think clearly. We realize that it is a world that is very chaotic and noisy. And we must be intentional now about trying to remove ourselves in a way that offers some positive distraction. And not just that, but also helps to build on our intellect. You see, when our minds are engaged, we are more restful. We feel more at peace. And we're not kind of driven by the wind of chaos as much. Because again, we're able to focus to build our minds, and our bodies naturally now will benefit if we feed the mind. Let us just pause for a minute and take a look more at intellectual health. And again, we're not talking about being book smart. Intellectual wellness is about curiosity, creativity, and a hunger to learn and grow. It is a process of keeping your mind active, open, and engaged in the world in which we live. How best can we do that? What are some things that we can do to build on our intellect and to nourish our minds? Well, practical ways are of such. Reading. Did you know that reading, and it doesn't matter what you're reading, just read. Reading allows us to withdraw from the cares of the world, and it allows us to engage in something that allows the brain to be more adaptive, to be more resilient, and it allows the brain to settle down so you feel more at peace, and it allows us to be mindful and present. That's a skill that requires intentionality, and it requires work. We do not just all of a sudden sit back and believe that we're learning something without some active process involved here. We have to do the work. So building on our intellectual health is important because, again, as I mentioned, the body physically, right, depend on it. The brain is really the center of our existence, It is what really feeds all of the systems in our bodies. So thinking about how we can nurture that brain, staying sharp is important. Not just that, but brain health in terms of our intellect help to sharpen our cognitive skills. We think about diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's. Studies have shown that engaging the mind in whether it's reading, whether it's learning a new skill, whether it's engaging in meaningful, positive conversations, it helps to delay the onset or the progress of dementia. Studies have shown that. So there are many benefits to engaging the mind so that it can function in a way that offers us more resiliency and adaptation. So there are many benefits, again, to building on our intellect. Now, let's take a look at some of the practical ways that we can really truly build incrementally. And again, I'm not talking about just being book smart. Yes, it's all well and good when we, own all the degrees and accolades. But again, this is not to say that you have to go back to school and do all of that stuff. Just small incremental ways to build on that. Let's take a look at just 5 of them. 1, read something new every day. It doesn't have to be a full chapter. Even a few paragraphs can open your mind to fresh perspectives. Just a small book. And I am one for books. I do not believe that we have to be engaged on the telephone or on the computer or on any electronic device to be able to learn. We also notice that this ongoing engagement with technology may not be best for our minds, because then it fosters a lot of anxiety, and this is what we're trying to manage today. The persistent onset and of anxiety and restlessness and irritability, we know that this does not help our mental health. So removing ourselves from that environment, reading, learning something new, even just a few pages of a small book, will not hurt, especially if you find that your mind is running away with you. Develop a routine of reading. Go back and get a library card. I'm hoping the libraries will stay open, because I remember going to the library, back in the days. I've always grown up reading books anyway. Going to the library removes us from a place where we may also be uneasy. So get a library card, go back to the library, browse through the pages of a book. Number 2, engage in meaningful conversations. Talk about ideas, not just events or problems. Talk about ideas. That helps to stimulate the mind. And again, these are just small incremental steps that we talk about here on One More Step to Wellness. They don't have to be big things. They're just small incremental steps that you can take every day to feeling well. Remember, we're talking about intellectual health, and we know that when we feed the mind positive things, or things that we know will help us grow, widen our knowledge base, and helps us gain new perspectives, really helps all of us, mind, body, and spirit. Number 3, learn a new skill or hobby. Whether it's painting, cooking, or learning a language, challenge your brain in joyful ways. This helps to build on our cognitive abilities, and the brain benefits from this tremendously. Number 4, practice reflective thinking. Keep a journal. Write down what you've learned or how you've grown. Reflection turns experience into wisdom. Number 5, limit mental clutter. Be intentional about your screen time. Give your mind space to breathe and focus. I've often told folks that I do not care for Post-it. I do not care for Post-it pads, because what happens, no matter what color, no matter what they look like, when you've written enough things on a Post-it pad and you paste them all over, you sometimes have no idea where to look and what you're looking for. And your mind is drawn into so many different directions that your mind becomes so mentally cluttered that you have no way of figuring out what you're even looking for in the first place. Or even when you go into a room, unless you have an idea of what you're really looking for, sometimes you go in and you're like, why did I even come in the room in the first place? There are times when our minds are going to play tricks on us. And we're going to forget, not to mention with, aging, right? We recognize that our cognitive skills aren't as sharp as they used to. But what we must do is to train our brain to do things and to think, to own a pattern of thinking that is predictable and something which we can benefit from. So in other words, do not allow your brain to run away with itself. You sit in the driver's seat and you tell your brain what to do. Otherwise, you're going to be drifting like the clouds and you have no idea where you're going. And this leaves room for anxiety and worry. An unengaged brain has plenty of room for everything else, and you want to avoid that. Now, again, you heard me say that our brains and minds and bodies, our brain and our bodies are deeply connected. When you take care of one, the other responds. So, Pair intellectual stimulation and self-care, because you cannot avoid self-care, which is, when we consider what self-care is, and for each person, I am sure that self-care may look different. But self-care is self-care. It's really just taking care of yourself and respecting the bodies that we have. It means then that we must be intentional about our sleep, our nutrition, how we're hydrating our bodies, our exposure to sunlight, social connections that are meaningful and positive and supportive of us. So many times we tend to be engaged in, whether it's company, whether it is a lifestyle that has no benefit to you or your mind. The use of substance like alcohol, smoking, we know has no benefit to the body. And so we must be careful about how we engage in those kinds of behaviors. But I want to encourage you again to think about your intellectual health, because again, our minds need to be noticed, in terms of how we think and how we act and how we feel. They're all connected. They're not one or separate from each other. When your mind is stimulated and focused, it's less likely to engage in worry and overthinking. Engage in your intellect can, one, improve focus and memory. It can reduce anxiety by redirecting energy into something positive, and it helps to build confidence and self-worth. And it even helps your brain release dopamine, that feel-good chemical that boosts mood and motivation. So again, learning new things can become a natural stress reliever as well. It's like giving your brain a mini vacation, a moment of flow and calm in a world that often feels noisy and demanding. So just think about it this way. We must pay attention to how we function every day and try to find ways, like I mentioned earlier, to build on your intellectual health. Intellectual health, it's one of those 8 dimensions of wellness. And as I mentioned, in a world that is just so busy and chaotic, withdraw yourself a little bit. Step away from the noise and really find ways to feed your brain. In closing, let me just say this. When we feed the mind with curiosity, we feed the soul with peace. I want to encourage you. See learning not just as pressure, but as pleasure. So, as I mentioned earlier, I want you to engage yourself again in activities that really helps to boost your mental health and your intellectual health, which is one of those dimensions that gets overlooked quite a bit. Because as I noted earlier, when we think about mental health, we're thinking about stress, we're thinking about anxiety, we're thinking about those kind of things that really shifts our mood. But feeding the brain with intellectual material, again, it's not about being in the books. It's really about engaging in activities that really helps to motivate us, to support us, and to encourage us. Not just that, it allows the brain to be more adaptable and resilient and cognitively sharp. Intellectual health also helps to delay disease progression. So, a couple things that you can do incrementally. Engage in meaningful conversations. Read a book. Learn a new hobby. Think about lifestyle measures that you can consider every day. Exercise, get some good sleep. Stay away from the overuse of social media. It really causes a lot of stimulation to the brain, and we want to protect the brain at all cost. So, with that being said, I want you to take a look at your intellectual health. Do something that allows you to grow every day. Journal how much you have grown from where you started to where you are today. Are you really feeding your brain what it needs to have to grow? Your brain needs food. Take a look at your intellectual health. And until I see you again, walk good. Take the steps that you need to take today. Take care and be well.